We begin today the Gemara on Daf Pei Hey Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom of the page where it says Boy Rabba. Continuing here, the halachas of one that injured another person, and you have to pay various different payments. The first payment you pay is nezek. The nezek is the fact that you brought down his value. If he would be sold as a slave, he doesn't have the same value anymore. Another kind of payment, the door please. Another kind of payment we spoke about that you have to pay is sheves. That's the fact that during this time that he's not well, he's unemployed, he can't go to work. So you have to pay him for that unemployment as well. So Boy Rabba asked the following shaila. Sheves hapoichse bedomim. If a person as a result of this injury is his value goes down, he can't work his regular work that he would usually do, and therefore his value goes down for this time period. He's going to eventually heal, but for this time period, if he would be sold as a slave, his value goes down, he can't do his regular work. Mahu, what's the halacha? Do you have to pay for this as well? And the Gemara explains what it means. Hey chidami, what's the case over here? If you hit someone on his hands, v'tzamsa yadai, and his hand gets this injury where his hand is weak and he can't use it properly. So whatever work he used to do, if he did work with his hands, he can't do that work right now. But in the end, it's going to heal, and he's going to be able to do the work again. What's the halacha here in this case? Even the seifa lachzar, do I say that since whatever injury there is here in his hand, he's going to heal, and eventually he's going to be able to do this work again? Lo yav le v'lo midi. So for this, during this time period, his value to be sold as an eved went down. He can't do the regular work he would usually do, but it's going to heal again. So you don't give him an extra payment for this. Or hashte mia afchase. For this time period, though, his value being sold as an eved did go down, so therefore you do have to pay him for that. So again, the point here is the Gemara means to ask. Besides the fact that during this time period he can't do any work, during when he's sick enough because of this injury that he can't do any work, that's what's called sheves. You pay for the fact that he's totally unemployed. That's one thing. The Gemara is not addressing that. What the Gemara is addressing is that even when he can go back to work, but he can only go back to do a work that is not his usual job because he can't use his hand properly, and that's going to take a longer time to heal. So during this time period, so his value went down. If he's going to be sold as an eved, he doesn't have the same value as a person usually has. Taisus here actually adds, the Gemara is asking the shaila regarding a case when it's not clear if this hand is going to heal again properly. So if he would be sold as an eved in the marketplace, a person is going to look at this eved and say, it's not clear if his hand is going to ever heal again. So in such a case, do you say that since it's not clear if it's going to heal again and therefore his value goes down, now as he's sold as an eved, besides the time that he's actually not working at all, you have to pay for sheves, do you also have to pay for this time period that his hand couldn't be used for his regular job? That's an extra level of payment that you have to pay for his value that went down for this time period. Says the Gemara Tashema, I'll bring you a proof of this. The Braisa says, a person that hits his father and mother, and he didn't cause any wound by this. Or a person hits his friend and does make a wound, and this was on Yom Kippur. So in both of these cases, you're going to be chayiv to pay all the payments that the Mishnah mentioned, the nezek, tzar, ripu, sheves, and baishes. The point that this Braisa here is saying is, the halacha is if a person hits his father and creates a wound, he's chayiv misa. And if a person is going to make a wound on his friend on Shabbos, you also chayiv misa. So in both of those cases, once you chayiv misa, there's no payment. Once you get the greater punishment, there's no payment. But over here, what this Braisa is saying is, in both of these cases, because there's no misa, so therefore there'll be a chayiv to pay. So the Gemara is going to focus on over here on this case when it says that he's paying all the kinds of payments, nezek, tzar, ripu, sheves, and baishes, for hitting a father without any wound. What does this mean? If there's no wound over here, so what exactly is he paying for? So the Gemara explains, when the Braisa says this example, that he hit his father or mother, and he didn't actually make a wound, but still he has to pay all the payments, including nezek. We're going to focus here on this payment of nezek, that he has to pay for the value of the father's body that became less through this. How does it become less, though, if there was no wound? Says the Gemara, Lav, don't you think the case here is the case that we said before, that he caused a certain wound which is not a permanent wound. It's a wound, it's something that right now his hand is weak and he can't use his hand properly. as a result of this clap that he got from his son. But then it's going to go back. It's going to return to its previous condition. Ve'katani, and the Brisa says, chayiv b'kulam. He has to pay all the payments that you have to pay for this kind of a wound, that goes back, including the nezek. So you see over here that even this kind of a wound, which has this temporary damage that he can't do his work, you also have to pay for that. Not only for the unemployment that he can't work at all, but also when he can go back to work. But he still can't go back to his regular work for a certain time period. You have to pay separately for the fact that that value went down, even though later he's going to get it back fully. That's what it seems like the case here is regarding hitting a father. Omri, so they answered to this and said, no, that's not what this Brisa was speaking about. What was the Brisa speaking about? When a person caused his father to become deaf, banged him on his ear, and he became deaf, and there's no actual wound over here. So therefore he's not chayiv misa, there's no wound, but he caused him to become deaf. And for that you have to pay all the kinds of payment. But that can't be the case, because a person that makes his father deaf, nerag, he's chayiv misa for this. It's impossible that a person becomes deaf without an actual wound of blood that comes out. Tipsa, the dama, nafale bodne. In his ear, there's a drop of blood that fell into his ear over there. That's what happens when a person becomes deaf. So there is an actual wound, even if it's not visible. So therefore, that can't be the case over here when it says that he's not chayiv misa. Ella, rather, the Gemara gives another answer. The case the Brisa is saying that when a person caused his father, he hit his father, and there was no real wound, but still he's going to have to pay all the payments for this. What's the case? If he shaved the hair of his father's head. And when he shaves the hair, so what happens? This is considered to be, the Gemara here soon is going to go through all the details about how he causes him all these different things that he has to pay. Nezek, tsar, ripoy, sheves, baishes. The Gemara will go through all of it. But first, regarding the nezek, a person that you shave his head and he becomes bald, so then his value also goes down to be sold as an eved. A person that's buying an eved and he looks at a person and sees that he has no hair at all, he starts thinking, something's weird about this person. Maybe he's not well. He doesn't have any hair. So his value also goes down. So you have to pay the nezek for that. But the Gemara asks on this, if this person came and shaved his father's hair, so isn't this something that grows back? If so, v'hainu bayan. This is exactly what our Shiloh was before regarding a person that caused a wound that will later heal. Do you have to pay for the value that went down for that time period that he was being sold as an eved, that he can't be sold for the same price anymore? So here as well, the hair that he shaves comes back. Amri, so they answered, in the case this Brisa is talking about, he smeared a certain cream, where the hair is not going to grow back. So therefore this is a permanent wound, this is a permanent blemish that the father lost his hair. Okay, so therefore you have to pay for the fact that the value of his body is being sold as an eved went down. That's what this Brisa is talking about. But it's not a temporary thing, so it's nothing to do with the Shiloh that we asked before. Now the Gemara spells out, the Brisa said that you have to pay everything. Nezek, tsar, ripu, sheves, and baishes. So if you cause a person, if you take the hair, if you shave the hair with this cream, that it's a permanent thing, that the hair will not grow back. How is there all the other modes of payment that apply here? So the Gemara explains it all. Tsar, what kind of payment for pain is there here? If the father had these cracks in the skin on his head, and so when you put on this cream and you shave the hair, so it was very painful for him, and therefore you have to pay for that pain. Ripoy, you have to pay for the medical bills for this. The boy, he needs a doctor to be able to heal then now these cracks of his skin that are now exposed, the result of the fact that you shaved his hair, so he needs a doctor for this. You have to pay for that as well. Sheves, you have to pay for his unemployment. What kind of unemployment is there here if the person, his hair was shaved?
He didn't make him do the cracks.
Yeah, but now because you shaved the hair, so now it became exposed, and therefore it's something that, you have to pay for it. Yeah, it hurts more. So yeah, he needs a doctor for that to help him. So Sheves, so the Gemara says, interesting case, to have a market bekuvi. If the father was a person that was an entertainer, he would dance for people between the stores. That's what it means, or he would dance by chasanas, let's say. The boy machve gavne aresha, that he makes certain motions and movements with his head in his entertaining while he dances. Now, and now he can't do those motions, he can't do his entertainment, because of the pain that he has of these cracks of the skin that he has now on his head that are exposed and it's so painful, so he can't do his regular work as an entertainer. So he's unemployed. Baishes, and the payment of embarrassment that he has to pay, to shave a person, and it's permanent, there's no greater embarrassment than this. That's the case that the Braisa is talking about. Yeah. The Gemara comes back now to the original Ibaye. Umilse, the Ibaye le Rabba, the Ibaye that Rabba asked before, when you have this damage where the person's value went down to be sold as a slave, but it was only temporary, whether you have to pay for that separately or not, Pshita le Abaye la Hachise, Abaye resolved this in one way, Ule Rava la Hachise, and Rava also resolved it, but in the opposite way. We learned regarding this exact case, the argument between them. You hit a person on his hand, then it got weak, and he can't use his hand now, but it will heal again later. So during this time period, he can't do his regular work. Do you have to pay for that? So Abaye says, sheves gedola. You have to pay him. He calls this Sheves Gedola great unemployment, which means you have to pay him for the fact that he's unemployed for an extended period of time. There's a longer period of time where his hand is not healed properly, and for that period of time, the value of his body is not the same. That's one payment you have to give him. And then also V'Sheves Ketana. Then you have to give him a different kind of unemployment, which is for a shorter time period that he can't work at all. He can't even do the job of sitting at a cucumber garden as a guard because he's in such pain. He can't do anything. So that's the payment for that unemployment. You have to pay both. So you see here, Abaye says you also have to pay for this temporary time period where he can't do his proper work and his value went down. However, Rava says, you only give him the unemployment that you have to pay him for the time period now that he can't work. That's it. You don't pay him any other. The fact that for a longer extended period of time he can't do his regular work, that you don't pay him for. You just pay him for this shorter time period that he can't work at all. But here, though, Rashi says, before it said when you pay a person for unemployment, you only pay him for what level of unemployment? What he could have been paid as a shemek yishuan, as a guard for a cucumber garden, a very, very cheap job. Why? Because usually you're paying him nezek. You're paying him for the damage of the fact that the value of his body went down. So therefore, for the unemployment, you pay very little. But in this case, he's not getting paid for anything for the fact that the value of his body went down for this time period. So here, for the time that he's unemployed, you have to pay him the full value of whatever his job was that he can't do right now. Itmer and we learned an argument also between Abaye and Rava. Haketeya yad eved ivri. If you cut off the hand of an eved ivri, Shachavere, belonging to Eved Ivri, owned by his friend, by his master. Abaye Amar, so who do you pay here? Do you pay the Eved himself or do you pay the master? He belongs to the master, so now that you cut off his hand, besides the loss for the person himself, obviously, Eved Ivri is only a person, a Yiddish Eved. He only works for 6 years. Then afterwards he goes out free. So there's a loss to the Eved himself, and there's also a loss to his master, that he can't work for the master. So who do you pay? Abaye says, you give the payment for the damage to the body, that the value of his body went down. That's what Sheves Gedola here means. That you give the payment to the Eved himself. It's his body. Even when he's an Eved, but he's going to be free. And then it's him that has this loss, and therefore he's the one that gets that payment. The Sheves Ketana l'Rav. But then you give the payment for the fact that he can't work this time period, that he can't work at all, that unemployment, that you pay to the master, because he's supposed to be working for the master. So you give him that payment. All right, so Tosfos over here explains, even though it comes out that the master is really losing out because he bought an Eved with a hand, and now he has an Eved that cannot work with his hand anymore. But that kind of payment the master does not get. Tosfos brings from the Gemara in Kiddushin that says that if you buy a slave, and this slave was a healthy person, and then during this time when he's a slave, he becomes sick and he can't work properly, it's the loss of the master. It's his bad luck that the slave that he bought became sick. So over here as well, the fact that now he's missing a hand and he can't work the way he was able to work before, it's the loss of the master that he doesn't get paid for that.
That's natural that somebody did it.
Yeah, true, and a chanami, true, it's right. So therefore, the Eved himself has to get paid for this damage, but that's the body of the Eved himself. Regarding the master, though, it's this circumstance that happened that it's his bad luck.
But how do you imagine Shavik Dale, Shavik Stana? Shavik Stana, I mean, Stana can take cost a few minutes. As long as Shavik Dale is...
No, it's two different things.
Yeah, well,
the Sheves Gedoyla is the fact that the value of his body now went down. This Eved Ivri, you have to evaluate now that he's going to be sold as an Eved without a hand, how much did his value go down? That's a permanent damage, and that's something that you have to evaluate separately. The Sheves Katana refers to the unemployment during the time when he's healing from this big wound here, and he can't work at all. He can't do anything. That Sheves Katana goes to the master. Rava says, Hakoil Yenosan Le'eved. You actually give all the payment of the damage of his body and of the unemployment when the time when he can't work. It all goes to the Eved himself. And now, what do you do now to compensate the master for the fact that the Eved can't work a certain time period? The Yilakich ben Karka, you buy a piece of property with this money, V'harav oichel peiris. And while he's the Eved, the master is going to eat from the fruits of this property to get compensated for this, that he can't work for this time period for his master. That's the girsa we have in our Gemara. That's how Rashi learns. Taisus, however, brings a different girsa that says that Rav is saying you give everything to the master, and you buy a karka with it, and the Eved is able to eat from it. Taisus has a different girsa, but this is the girsa we have here in our Gemara. So the Gemara Vaita, another halacha, or actually, sorry, no, this is actually here explaining the machlekes of Abai and Rav. Pshita, it would be obvious if the case over here that this Eved, there was a damage that was done to this Eved. If it's a case where it's piches etzel atzmai, the damage is only to the Eved himself. The master does not get affected by this at all. And the Gemara is going to give the example in a second. Ve'etzel rabbi loy piches. There's no, the value of this Eved did not go down for the master. Hey Chidami, what's the case? The paske l'reish unei, someone came and cut off the tip of his ear, or l'reish nechire, or cut off the tip of his nose. So in such a case, hakayla atzmai. So whatever payment there is for the Eved for this, the Eved gets this payment himself, not the master, because he can still work for the master the way he worked before. It's the Eved himself, his value goes down. If later on he's going to want to be sold as an Eved and someone sees that the tip of his nose or the tip of his ear is cut off for himself, that his value goes down. But the work that he does for his master, though, does not get affected. If, like we mentioned before the example, his hand was cut off, and this is something that causes a loss for the master as well, that's the plukta d'Abai v'Rava. That's where the argument of Abai and Rava applies, as we mentioned before, whether the Eved gets paid or the master gets paid, as was explained before. Okay, now going to a different subject that it said in the Mishnah. When you pay for embarrassment, so you pay according to the level of the one that embarrassed. Who's the one that embarrassed you? You can't compare if it's just a simple individual that embarrassed you or a prominent person comes and embarrasses. It's much bigger embarrassment. And also the one that got embarrassed. The level of the person that got embarrassed, and you can't compare the different kinds of people, how they take the embarrassment.
So 2 payments?
No. It's one payment. But we evaluate the payment based on the one that embarrassed and the one that got embarrassed. Says the Gemara Mari Masnisen, according to whose opinion is our Mishnah going like? Loy Rab Meir, v'loy Rab Yehuda. It's not like Rab Meir's opinion, not like Rab Yehuda's opinion. Ella Rab Shimon he. Our Mishnah follows Rab Shimon's opinion here in the following brayse. Tanan or the Tanya, in the brayse. So here Rab Meir says as follows: V'kulan. Anybody that got embarrassed, how do you evaluate the payment? We evaluate them as a free person that was rich, but he lost some of his money. In other words, he's trying to give you a certain level of evaluation that would be equal for everyone. You don't evaluate a person that got embarrassed that he would be someone that's very poor. Someone that's very poor, the kind of payment for him for embarrassment is very little because he's a poor person and therefore his embarrassment doesn't matter to him that much. If you would evaluate him as someone that's very rich, so a person like this, his embarrassment, it can be an exorbitant sum of money because of his prominence, his embarrassment is something which is very high. But over here he says this is a balanced way to evaluate this for everybody the same. Someone that had money and he lost some of his money, so it's like in between and he got embarrassed. That's the kind of payment you have to pay for anybody that got embarrassed. And he explains, Shehem, Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, all Yidden are the same. All Yidden are the children of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and therefore everyone deserves the same kind of payment for embarrassment. David Rab Meir, this is Rab Meir's opinion. Rab Yehuda says, Hagadol if Godloi, a greater person, a more prominent person gets paid on his level of embarrassment. V'akotn if Kotnoi, and a person that's lower down, and a person that's poor, he gets paid for his level of embarrassment. Everybody on their level of embarrassment. Rab Shimon says, Ashirim, rich people that got embarrassed. We take the evaluation Rab Meir said. We see we pay them not fully. So he's lenient here regarding this detail of rich people. You don't pay them like Rabbi Yehuda said, Lefi Godla, according to his level of richness, where he gets very offended by him when he gets embarrassed. You pay them less than that. You pay them as if they lost some of their money, not such a high level of payment. Aniyim, poor people, kepchusin shebehem, you pay them like the lowest level of poor people. That this is again another kula here. Rab Shimon is being lenient regarding the payment, but by poor people you pay them like the poorest people. That the embarrassment is very, very cheap over there. Okay, so now the Gemara says, our Mishnah that says that you have to evaluate the mizbayish, the level of the person that gets embarrassed. Whose opinion is it? Mani, who's our Mishnah? Rab Meir, if you would say our Mishnah is Rab Meir, that can't be. Masnis and Katani, the Mishnah, it says that you pay according to the one that embarrassed and according to the level of the one that got embarrassed. But Rab Meir, however, Rab Meir here said, that all Yidden are the same. All Yidden are Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and they all get the same payment. Rab Yehuda, if you would say our Mishnah follows Rab Yehuda seems to fit with our Mishnah. Rab Yehuda says, a godl if you godla, a kotla if you kotna, you go by the level of the person, exactly like our Mishnah said. But nevertheless, here the Gemara says, there's another halacha that says later in the next Mishnah that doesn't fit with Rab Yehuda's opinion. Because Masnis and Ketani, the Mishnah later on says, Hamavayish asasuma chayiv. If you embarrass a blind person, you chayiv to pay for the embarrassment. V'ilu Rab Yehuda Eimer, Rab Yehuda's opinion is, Suma ein le'baishis. By a blind person, there is no payment for embarrassment. So therefore, the Mishnah, based on the next Mishnah, cannot be Rab Yehuda's opinion either. Elalav Rab Shimoni. So the Mishnah must go according to the opinion of Rab Shimon, which says that you go according to the mizbayish, even though Rab Shimon says we're lenient about it, but nevertheless, there is a difference in the level of payment between a rich person and a poor person. That's Rab Shimon's opinion. But the Gemara now says, Afilatayim Rab Yehuda. The issue we had with saying that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda is regarding a blind person that got embarrassed. But I can tell you that our Mishnah would still follow Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Kiyama Rabbi Yehuda, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Sumein le'baishis, that by a blind person there's no embarrassment, lemishkal minei. That's to take payment of embarrassment, for embarrassment, from a blind person that embarrassed someone. In that case, there's no payment. The blind person doesn't have to pay for embarrassing someone. Avalemeis v'lei. But to pay a blind person when he got embarrassed, yavinanle, for that he does have to be paid, and therefore this could still fit with our Mishnah. All the Mishnah said is that in our Mishnah it said hamavayish asasum chayiv, and Rabbi Yehuda agrees to that. All Rabbi Yehuda was saying is that a blind person that embarrasses does not have to pay for the embarrassment. But the Gemara says this is not true because v'amidikatani seife in the Mishnah where it says hamavayish asasuma, that if you embarrass a blind person, yechayev, and in that Mishnah it says, if you embarrass a blind person, if you embarrass a person when he's sleeping, and the Mishnah says you're still going to be chayev for it. But then in the Sefer, that Mishnah continues and says, Hamavayish es hayashon chayev. If you mevayish a person that sleeps, you chayev. But v'yashon shebiyish, however, a person that's asleep, and somehow with the movements during his sleep, he embarrasses someone else, potter. He's going to be potter for embarrassing someone. That same distinction that it says regarding a sleeping individual, that if he got embarrassed, you have to pay him for the embarrassment. But if he embarrasses someone else, he does not have to pay. That same distinction it does not say regarding a blind person. So therefore, Miklal, from this we see the that the opinion of the Mishnah is, doesn't make a difference if the blind person embarrassed someone else or the blind person got embarrassed. Either way, he doesn't receive payment and he doesn't have to pay. So therefore, that's not like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says that a blind person, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that a blind person, there's no baishas. So Ela machvarte masnisen Rab Shimoni. Go back to the pshat we said before. The correct pshat, the best pshat is like we said before, that the Mishnah follows Rab Shimon. Talk to Gemara man Tana law the Tana Rabbanon. Who's the Tana of the following brayse? So the brayse says Neskavan u'bayish as a cotton. A person intended to embarrass a cotton. So simply a cotton, the Gemara understands, the Gemara will soon explain it, understands a cotton would mean a person that's lower down in society, a person that's poor. He wanted to embarrass this poor person. And instead, he ended up embarrassing a person that's rich. Because his intention was only to embarrass a cotton, you pay this gadol that payment of a cotton. He intended to be mevayish, a slave, or and he ended up embarrassing someone else, a free person. You only pay this free person the value of the embarrassment that there would be for a slave. That's the Braisa. Mani, which one of the opinions that we mentioned before, Rab Meir, Rab Yehuda, and Rab Shimon, according to who does this Braisa go? Lei Rab Meir, v'lei Rab Yehuda, v'lei Rab Shimon. Seemingly, it doesn't go like any of the opinions we mentioned before. Now the Gemara explains, the Gemara was thinking at this point, when it says here, cotton, what did cotton mean? Cotton ben a chasim, a person that's poor. Gadol means gadol ben a chasim, a person that's rich. That's the meaning of the Braisa. So now, Rab Meir, if this Braisa would be going like Rab Meir, can't be, because Rab Meir says, Kulu bahadi hadadin. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, all Yidden of Bnei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, you get paid the same amount. So why is the Braisa discussing this distinction over here? Rab Yehuda, if would follow Rab Yehuda's opinion, so that can't be for another reason that it's brought later on the next daf, because Rab Yehuda says, Ein la avodim baishas. When you embarrass an Eved, there's no payment of embarrassment for an Eved Kanani. So over here, how could it say that if you embarrass the Ben Chayrin, you pay the level of payment of an Eved? There is no payment of Baishas for an Eved. Rab Shimon, and if this Braisa would be following Rab Shimon's opinion, that can't be either. Why? Because Rab Shimon says, and the Gemara here is going to now bring the source and explain this, but Rab Shimon's opinion is, Niskavim levayish hazeh, ubiyish hazeh, if you intended to embarrass one person, and then by mistake you embarrass someone else, potter. So you potter for this embarrassment altogether. So over here, that this Bryce is talking about, you intended to embarrass a cotton and you embarrassed a gadol, you should be potter for this altogether. What's Rab Shimon's source? Where do we see Rab Shimon said this? My time keketola. We compare this to Rab Shimon's opinion, what he says regarding when by a murderer. Ma ketola, just like if you kill. So what happens? The halacha there is adam eskaven lei. You only chayv misa when you intended to kill this person that you killed. Meaning, even if the person was amazed, but he ended up killing someone that he didn't want to kill, even though the action was done b'mezid, he's still potter. The pasuk says, "V'arav loy v'kam olav achi yiskaven loy," that you were aiming for this person, you wanted to kill this individual. So if you killed someone else, you're not chayv misa for that. So baishis nami, by the payment for embarrassment as well, ad the miskaven lei. You only pay for the embarrassment when you had kavanah to embarrass this person. The chsiv, as the pasuk says, this is the source of where it says in the Torah, the payment for embarrassment, when a woman goes and embarrasses a man, she went and she embarrassed him, she grabbed him by his private areas, and then this embarrassed this person. Achi iskaven loy. Mimavushav means until she's mechaven to this person, and therefore, according to Rab Shimon, in this case, he should be totally potter. So the Braisa can't be Rab Shimon's opinion either. Answers the Gemara, who's this Braisa? Lo'ilam Rab Yehuda. This is really Rab Yehuda's opinion. Our question before was, according to Rab Yehuda, there is no payment for an Eved. How could this Braisa say that you evaluate the payment of an Eved? You don't actually, if you actually embarrass an Eved, you don't pay the Eved for that embarrassment. But in this case, though, he did not embarrass an Eved. He embarrassed a Ben Chayrin, a free person. So now, to evaluate the value of the damage, or the embarrassment that is, you could use the Eved to evaluate what the value of his embarrassment would be. And then you give that payment to the Ben Chayrin. And the embarrassment of an Eved is less than a Ben Chayrin. But it doesn't say in this, but I say that you would actually be paying an Eved. An Eved himself, you don't pay. You pay the Ben Chayrin that value that an Eved, the value of his embarrassment is. So it could still be like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Another way to explain this Braisa is Rab Meir. This Braisa could be following Rab Meir's opinion. So our question was that according to Rab Meir, a rich person, a poor person, you always get paid the same. Mi Savres, do you think Godel, when the Braisa speaks about a Godel, it means Godel ben a Chasim? It means a person that's rich. And Cotton there means Cotton ben a Chasim, a person that's poor. That's not what it means. Loi, Godel means Godel Mamish. A Godel means a person that's a Godel, above bar mitzvah. The Cotton means Cotton Mamish, a child. That he intended to embarrass a child, and he ended up embarrassing an adult. So you pay for the adult the level of payment of the embarrassment that there would be for a child. That distinction between an adult and a child, even Rab Meir agrees to. So the Gemara asks him this, but the cotton bar boishesu. Could you say that when you embarrass a child, you have to pay for the embarrassment? Is a child someone that has feelings that he gets embarrassed and you have to pay him for this kind of embarrassment? A child himself behaves in all kinds of ways where he embarrasses himself. So there's no payment of embarrassment for him. So the Gemara answers, yes, it is possible. Rav Papa says later here in the Gemara, the michlam malay or michlam. In a case where you have a child where when you embarrass him, he gets embarrassed. And even if b'shas ma'isa, when you embarrass him, he doesn't really get embarrassed, but when you remind him about what happened, he feels embarrassed about this. So a child that's on that level, that he has feelings, and in this level of embarrassment, so then you have to pay this child for this embarrassment as well. So there is a payment. Achanami here as well, the michlam alei or michlam, that when you tell him about this embarrassment, that's how Rashi learns this. When you remind him about this, that he got embarrassed, he feels bad. He has pain about the fact that he was embarrassed, even though during the time when he got embarrassed, he doesn't have the sensitivity to feel what's really happening to him. But later on, when you talk to him and explain him this, he gets embarrassed, and that's what this Braisa was talking about. If you embarrass someone that's not dressed, person here, so we're talking about a person that goes out, it seems like the Mishnah is talking about a person that goes out in the street with not dressed, and you went and you embarrassed him. You embarrass someone that's blind. You embarrass someone that's asleep. You have to pay for this embarrassment. However, the yoshan shebiyish, person that's asleep, and during his sleep, his body made motions, and it ended up embarrassing someone, potter. He'll be potter for the embarrassment he caused. Nafal min agag, a person fell down from a roof, v'hizik, and he fell down onto someone, and he damaged that person, he injured that person, and ubiyish, and he also embarrassed that person. Chayev ala nezek, for the damage that he causes, for that you are chayev, because even though you didn't do this intentionally, but adam muad la'ilam, if you're in a place where there's a certain level of negligence, being on a rooftop where you end up falling down, you have to pay for that. But upater ala baishes, for the embarrassment that you caused him, you're going to be pater achei miskaven, because for embarrassment, you only chayev if you intended to do this action that causes the embarrassment. But over here, if you fell off and you didn't intend to embarrass, for this, there's a pasuk we had earlier in the Masechta, we learn out that you're not chayev for this embarrassment. Tana Rabbanan and Abraisa we learned, if you embarrass someone that's naked, you chayev to pay for this. But you can't compare embarrassing someone which is not dressed to someone that is dressed, and therefore the level of the payment for the embarrassment is much less. You embarrass someone which is in a bathhouse, you also chayev for this. But you can't compare embarrassing someone in the bathhouse to someone that's embarrassed in the street. That's the Braisa. So the Gemara asks on this, the Tan in the Braisa here said, you embarrass someone that walks out in the street and he's not dressed, you're going to be chayev for this. A person that walks out into the street without clothing, he's embarrassing himself in the greatest degree. So doesn't care about being embarrassed. So whatever embarrassment you embarrass him, you're going to be chayev for that. Rashi's pshat in the Gemara over here is that a person like this that walks out on the street this way, you shouldn't be chayev for any embarrassment because he's embarrassing himself to the greatest degree. Taisus actually says this person that walks out undressed into the street, but if you spit at him or you embarrass him in any other way, you still should be chayev for that. And the Gemara is not asking that. What the Gemara is asking is, if the embarrassment consists of the fact that you expose the person, that's what the embarrassment is. The Gemara is asking, well, he's totally exposed. He already walked out into the street. So how could you be chayev for that? That's Tosfos' pshat.
Maybe he's embarrassing for something else.
No. Like I said, Tosfos says that the question of the Gemara is specifically regarding the fact that he's undressed. So he's already undressed. So how would you be chayev? Okay, but Rashi holds there's no embarrassment at all for such a person that walks out this way. Rav Papa explains, what does it mean here when this person was undressed? It doesn't mean literally that he walked out on the street undressed. What it means is, he walked out, he was dressed. But the asa zike, a wind came and karchinu lamane, it folded up, it lifted up his clothing that he's wearing. Talking about in those days, people didn't wear pants the way they wear. A person's wearing this long garment, and the wind lifts up his garment. And v'asu dalinu tfei. Someone else, when the wind comes and already lifted up his garment, and he got exposed by the wind, and someone came and lifted up his garment even more, or baishe, and that's how he embarrassed him. So that you chayev for. It's not like this person intended to embarrass himself, that he doesn't care, he walks out undressed into the street. Now, similar, the Gemara asks regarding a person that's in the bathhouse and he's undressed. Chayiv, you chayiv for this. When a person is undressed in the bathhouse, so you embarrassed him how? By undressing him, he's already undressed in the bathhouse. That's one shot, or maybe according to Rashi over here as well. In the bathhouse, there's no embarrassment at all. Rav Papa answers, similar over here, we're not talking about a person that's literally in the bathhouse undressed, but we're talking about a person that went down to the river to wash his feet, and he was exposed a little bit, and you came and exposed him more. So for that, you're chayiv for exposing him more than he was when he was washing himself. Rabba Bar Mammal asked the following shaila, a very fundamental iboya regarding b'chlal, the payment for embarrassment. If you embarrass a person when he's asleep, umeis, but then he didn't wake up from his sleep. Mahu, what's the halacha? Do you have to pay for this embarrassment or not? So what's the basis of his question? Rav Zvid explains, this is the basis of his question. Do you say mishom kisufuhu, when you have to pay for embarrassment, so you're actually paying for the feelings that you hurt. You've hurt the person's feelings and he got embarrassed. So therefore, vaha mislay. So this person that passed away in his sleep, v'les lekisufa. So there's no feelings of embarrassment, so you don't have to pay. Oy dilme, or maybe the whole payment that you pay for baishes is not for the feelings of embarrassment. Mishum zilusahu. You have to pay for the fact that you disgraced him. The fact that you took a human being and you disgraced him or you degraded him, for that itself you have to pay. It's not because of the feelings that the person actually has, but it's the fact that you disgraced him, that's what you have to pay for. And the fact that he got this, you disgraced him during the sleep, you have to pay for that, and now he passed away, so you're going to have to pay his children for this, for the fact that you disgraced their father. Toshima, the Gemara says, let's bring a raya to this. It says, Nabrai said, Rab Meir says, Cheresh, v'katan, a deaf mute, or a cotton, a child, yeshlem baishes. There is a payment of embarrassment for them. Shaita, however, a person that's a shaita, a mentally deranged person, ein loy baishes. So for him, there's no payment of embarrassment. So the Gemara explains what's the reason for this distinction. If you're going to say the payment of the embarrassment is because of the fact that you disgraced this person, so that's how it can make sense that it says here that there's payment of the baishes for this cotton, because you disgraced him. So the Gemara's understanding is that by a cotton, he doesn't have the awareness, the sensitivity, the feelings of embarrassment that you would have to pay for that. But the fact that he was disgraced, that you do have to pay for. That's not the issue of his own feelings. It's the fact that you disgraced the person. If you're going to say the payment is for the feelings of embarrassment, is there the payment of embarrassment for a child? Does he have those kind of feelings that you would have to pay for this? So you see over here regarding a cotton, you see that it has to be before the zilusa, for the fact that you disgraced him. So but the Gemara now asks, Elamai mishum zilusa, if you're going to say that the payment of the baishes is for the fact that you disgraced him, so if so, fill a shaita nami. So even a shaita should have to pay for the fact that he was disgraced. Why are we saying a shaita there's no payment of baishes? Amri, no. But then that, the Gemara says, the answer is, shaita elacha baishes gedayla mizu. Oh, a shaita, by his mental condition, he's disgraced already, wherever he is, wherever he goes. So therefore, even the zilusa, there is no payment of zilusa, of the disgrace for this person because of his condition. Okay, but the Gemara comes back though, if so, mikol makayim nifshait mina, shouldn't we resolve and answer from this braise, the mishom ziluso, that the payment of the baisha is for the disgrace? The imishum kisufa, as we said before, because if it was for the feelings of the embarrassment, cotton bar kisufo, there's a cotton have, there's a child have this kind of feelings for this embarrassment. So Gemara answers the same point we brought before already here. Rav Papa. Rav Papa said, what kind of a child are we talking about? The michlam malay or michlam? That when he's embarrassed and later on he's reminded about this, it does hurt him. And therefore there are feelings over here. Hachanami the michlam malay michlam. So therefore that's what this Bryce was talking about, that a cotton has this embarrassment. Now, Rav Papa said that this Ibaya, Rav Abba Bar Mamal asked, the version of this Ibaya went a little different. Hachid kam Ibaya, this is how the Ibaya went. Mishom kisufa dideyu. Do you say that when you have to pay baishes, is the payment for the person's own feelings, of his own embarrassment? And therefore, if you embarrass a person in his sleep, and then he passed away in his sleep, he passed away, so therefore you don't have to pay for his own feelings of embarrassment. This that the Torah says you have to pay for embarrassment, it's not just for his own feelings. It's for the fact that you embarrassed the family. You embarrassed them when you embarrass one person, it's not just the one person, it's the whole family. So if you embarrass a person when he's sleeping and he passes away, you still should have to pay for the embarrassment that the family now has hard feelings because of this. So again, the Gemara brings up the same brayse and the same discussion. Tashema, the brayse says, cheresh v'katan, a deaf mute or a child, yeshle baishes, you pay baishes. Shaita only baishes. A shaita, there is no payment of baishes. Now, iyom rebishleim mishum baishes mishpache. So the Gemara says like this: if the payment is for the embarrassment of the family, hayna diktani katan. That's why you're paying for embarrassing a child, even though the child doesn't have feelings for this, but nevertheless, his family gets embarrassed by it. But if it's his own feelings, the child himself has feelings that he has to be paid for this. So the Gemara says, but no, so what are you going to say? You have to pay for the embarrassment of the family. But if so, why does the Brisa say that by a shaita you don't pay? By a shaita, even if he's mentally deranged, but the family should have to pay for the embarrassment that they experience if you embarrass him. Says the Gemara, no, that doesn't apply. Even if you say that the point is the family's embarrassment, shaita the shaita, because of his condition, the family is always ashamed of him and embarrassed of him, or they shouldn't be ashamed of him. But the point is that his behavior is something which is a kind of embarrassment, and therefore, for that you don't have to pay, not only for his own baishis, but not for the family either. But Kol Makim, says the Gemara, nifshet mino. But going back again to the main point here regarding a child, let's answer this shaila from the child. The mishum baishis mishpache, that it has to be that the payment is for the embarrassment of the family. The mishum kisufa, because if the payment is for the embarrassment of the person himself, katan bar kisufu is a child, a person that has feelings for this embarrassment that he experienced. Yes, it is possible a child has these feelings of embarrassment. The when he's embarrassed and later on he's reminded about this, he does have bad feelings about this. But Tanya, the Gemara brings a raya to this. We learned in the Braisa, Rabbi said, Cheresh, a deaf mute, yeshle baishes. If you embarrass him, you have to pay him for this embarrassment. Shaita en le baishes. A shaita, there's no payment of embarrassment. Now, what's with a cotton? So here you see this point that a cotton, it depends. Cotton, pa'amim yeshle, and pa'amim ein le. A cotton, sometimes you have to pay, and sometimes you don't have to pay. And this is based on what our Papa said. The michlem me'aleo michlem. If he's a cotton, that when you remind him about what happened to him, he feels bad about it, so you have to pay him about this embarrassment. The michlem me'aleo v'lei michlem. But if he has no feelings at all, even if you remind him about this, he doesn't care about it, so then you don't have to pay this cotton at all for this embarrassment.